Welcome to The State of Us.
Beyond mainstream cable news and party lines, with a millennial and a boomer, The State of Us pushes past the noise and uncovers all the issues that matter.
Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
New methods rooted in low-impact precision techniques require less land, less energy, and fewer chemicals than traditional agriculture. More than 70% of American adults are now obese or overweight, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Nearly 1 in 10 is severely obese, and more than 1 in 10 is diabetic. An unavoidable implication of these numbers is that the conventional wisdom on weight loss, eat less, move your body more, has failed tens of millions of Americans. What are we talking about today? Well, two things, and they're interconnected, also separate though. The environmental upside of modern farming. We talk about farming, and a lot of what you hear in the news nowadays is how terrible it is and how we should just all starve by eliminating farming. But not really. I'm being obviously facetious there, but the point is we hear a lot of negative stuff about modern farming. Some interesting information, though, on how much farming has improved over the last 50 to 80 years. Additionally, we're going to look at the possibility of meat being our healthiest option. This is from an essay in the Wall Street Journal entitled The Keto Way. What if meat is our healthiest diet? And it's got some interesting research there that we'll be looking into as well. We've got a full plate today, and of course we couldn't begin to devour it without.
TrueChat senior historian and an educator of more than 30 years. Here is your friendly redneck liberal, Lance Jackson.
Well, having always lived in farm country, those of you who are listening to us in major metropolitan areas that have never ventured to a farm, but you eat food every day, thank a farmer. You know, before you come down and say, oh, these people are destroying, blah, blah, you better thank them, because that's why you get to eat. If you eat food, if you choose to eat other things that, you know, are grown in laboratories and things like that, more power to you. But if you're eating food, you need to thank a farmer, and come visit us sometime and see the technology and the science that is being used right now. It's a long, long way from Little House on the Prairie and Pa hitching up the horse and putting the straps over his shoulders and having the horse pull the plow through the ground. It's amazing when you see what some of these farm families are using in the way of science and technology to produce the food we're eating. But, you know, the interesting word here is the word sustainable, which is an adjective, but the root word is sustain. So SUSTAIN. The first definition means to keep in existence, to keep up, maintain, or prolong. That's what we're talking about here. And it is amazing what has happened in farming, even in the last 100 years, right, Justin?
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's exactly what I was going to, Lance, because like many things that we talk about on this show, it requires a little sprinkle of history on here to understand where we're at, because this is something common, Lance, and this is what the article leads off with that I think we hear a lot nowadays. And honestly, I'll be the first to tell you, right, that there's a lot of things, having grown up in an agricultural community, having grown up on a farm, a lot of things that farming has room to and continue to improve on. But I think if you really understand the history of farming, which is a history of constant innovation and constant pursuit of the most effective and sustainable ways, generally speaking, to produce the best end result, you start to understand that it's just a matter of figuring out the right balance. And that's part of the ongoing struggle that it's easy to say we, the world, face, but at the end of the day, it's the farmers who face that. Because, they experience firsthand when mistakes are made, when soil erosion becomes too severe. Obviously the Dust Bowl being a perfect example of farming feeling its own consequences. Nobody was hurt more than the farmers. Yes, the country hurt because of the inavailability of food production. And that's where you get to this line that the article points out to us, which is, if you want to produce food at the lowest cost to the environment, what method would you use? Would you select modern farming methods, such as large-scale, specialized, mechanized, and increasingly digital options? Or would you opt for traditional farms that are small and low-tech? Clearly, Lance, environmentalists often refer to the latter, right? That last option, those traditional farms. But the point that the article goes on to make is that, and that I think is super important for people to understand, is that traditional farming had already failed as a protector of the environment nearly 100 years ago. And scientific advances have long offered new ways to help the planet. In the 1930s, after low-yield crop farming was extended onto the drought-prone southern plains, the soil blew away, creating the disastrous Dust Bowl. Cropland expansion could finally be halted in the 1950s once scientists had developed higher-yielding hybrid seeds. In the 1970s, engineering advances allowed farmers to plant seeds in unplowed fields, which reduced erosion, conserved soil moisture, and sequestered carbon and saved on diesel fuel. At the end of the day, what does that boil down to, Lance? Well, the big stat that they highlight for us is that for beef, every pound of production now requires 19% less feed, 30% fewer animals, and 33% less land than in the 1970s. Additionally, the research shows that each million pounds of milk produced in the U.S. today requires 90% less land compared with 1944 and 79% fewer animals.
And the research that is quoted here in this article, before everybody says, well, yeah, this is just the farmers, talking good about themselves. The group that came up with this research includes the World Wildlife Fund, okay, which is known throughout, obviously, the World Wildlife Fund, for doing things that's best for the planet. So these are numbers that are pretty irrefutable. And if you go through corn production, wheat production, chicken, pork, all of it, they are producing more with less than they were. So we're actually getting more food produced now on less land, using less fertilizer, using less water, having fewer problems with the groundwater than we did in the 1950s, 70s, and 80s. So, I mean, pick a decade, and farmers are doing the job better with less of the, quote, terrible things that we normally equate with farming, like the pesticides and the fertilizers and the manures and all that kind of stuff that, people, this is ruining the planet. Okay, they're getting by with less than that than ever before and continuing to improve, and at the same time, producing more. So it's really, when you look at it in that way, okay, you can still have some issues. Well, we're still doing this and all that kind of stuff, but you have to give people some credit when they're providing what's keeping us all alive, and they're doing it and doing less damage than they've ever done before.
The bottom line from what you said, Lance, that's key for people to understand. Should farming quit improving? No. Does farming have it all right now? No. Is it doing the absolute best job it can for the environment? No.
Isn't it doing the best job it can for the environment right now?
Well, I didn't say right now.
Well,
I just
but they
generally
are doing the best. But aren't they doing aren't we always, all of us doing, this is philosophical, but aren't we all doing the best we can in the moment? That doesn't mean we don't have room to improve.
You would hope so, right? I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable definitively judging that one way or the other, because it all comes back to the economy of it. I mean, why do farmers want to protect the planet? Well, because if they don't, their way of life goes away. I don't think probably any farmer intentionally sets out to harm the planet. If anything, I think they all intentionally are out there to try to do what is reasonably best for the planet. At the same time, it's important to note that in other areas like America's livestock systems, we lag behind pretty badly in protecting animal welfare. And this is a major area, Lance, that I spent time during my 8 or so years running a cattle company and a chicken business that I focused on, because there was good circumstantial research at the time, and now much more definitive research that shows we can farm almost as efficiently. And actually, the end result is more efficient if we take better care of the animals that we use to produce food. And why is that? Animals, generally speaking, because it's a lot more complex than this, but we'll boil it down for you. Generally speaking, think about this, right? When you're stressed, what's one of the first things that you are likely to do? You are likely to eat, right? And you are likely to overeat substantially past what you need. You are likely to spend more money, be less efficient, right? Get lazy. These are all things that humans, right? You, me, everybody else, this is what we do. Animals are not that different. And when they're stressed or they're unhappy or they're bored, what do? Well, they're generally less efficient. And that's just a biological fact. But that's part of what we have to talk about coming up, right, Lance? We're going to look at meat alternatives and also the question of what if beef and what if other sources of meat, seafood, pork, chicken, what if those are our healthiest option? And that might sound like an oxymoron to you. So you'll have to keep it here on The State of Us to find out why that might not be the case. We'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
If our efficiency in beef production is improving, Lance, then it would stand to reason that we should be making some dents, right, on the climate. The reason the net bottom line, right, is still getting worse is because more people worldwide have access to meat than we've ever had, and there's more people than we've ever had. So even if you improve the efficiency, you're still gaining total consumption, right? And the conventional wisdom here, and this is part of why this article caught Lance and I's attention, is that if you want to be healthy, the proposition is that animal-sourced foods, in particular red and processed meats, aren't just bad for the planet, but they are harmful for the people who eat them. This has become the lone piece of dietary counseling on which most nutritional authorities seemingly agree. It creates a win-win proposition. By eating mostly or even exclusively fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes, while getting our protein and fats from plant-based sources, we maximize our likelihood of living a long and healthy life while also doing what's right for the planet. But is it that simple, Lance?
And what's interesting, though, is that the article also states that Americans are eating 5 times more meat today than they were 50 years ago. So along with all those other things you said, that was my big takeaway there. But understand, before we hear from all of our lovers of animals, the semantics police are out on you, Justin, and we humans are also animals. You kind of in the last segment said, well, humans do this and animals do that.
I was going off of the conventional referrals, but you know that I'm one of the first people to remind us, right, that we think ourselves so much superior.
I'm just saying before people blow up the email, for podcast@thestateofus.org and let everybody.
Is that how they get a hold of us?
That's how they get a hold of us,
Okay.
podcast@thestateofus.org, that I thought I would correct you to save us from reading those thousands of emails that will come in. And Justin referred to humans as being different than animals. He said that there are humans and then there are animals and we're all the same. So anyway, and I hope you like my voice there.
Is that what's that voice? Is that Gen Z like universally, or what's?
I don't know what it is.
Who are we being there?
It's just old man.
Okay.
Thinking of listening to those people who have who like to complain about what the others, how the rest of us misspeak at certain times.
Okay.
So no one person. That's just an amalgamation of all people.
Of all.
Yeah, who do that.
Okay.
But it is, it's an interesting question when you look at, okay, but what is it that's wrong with you and what's causing this and how's the body work? And you can bring in, evolutionary data as far as how we are keyed in as the high level functioning mammals that we are. Notice how I avoided saying humans. And this is an interesting issue that I have a lot of personal understanding of. This whole keto sensation. I looked at my brother and I said, "Oh, you mean you're doing the Atkins diet?" He goes, "What?" And I said, "The Atkins diet." I said, you're eating meat and you're cutting this out and you're slowly adding vegetables back to it. But you're staying away from the breads. You're staying away from the carbs." He goes, "Yeah. And I'm just feeling awesome." And I'm like, "Yeah, you will." I've done that before and it works. But then there's always that little mechanism, like you said, whether it's stress or whatever that kicks in. And when I have that first piece of bread or that piece of toast or whatever, and it's just that slice of pizza with the dough, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, bread, it's so awesome." And then it causes me to regress. And it's really hard for some of us to find that balance. And when you study some of it, we're not supposed to, because we're supposed to eat those things, especially those of us who live in cold climates. That's how we stayed alive, was to store that fat, during the winter time. So we had something to stay alive, but now we don't need that. And that's the problem. Our bodies are still eating like we don't live in climate controlled houses and buildings. And therein lies the problem, which then opens up this whole debate over what's the best way to eat to live the healthiest.
Well, and here's the part, Lance, that I thought was interesting from the article. First, right, you're referring to what many talk about today as the keto diet. And understanding the basic principles of keto, right, are that they're based on the proposition that for those predisposed to become obese or diabetic, carbohydrate-rich foods trigger that predisposition. We're talking about insulin production here, folks, essentially.
I'm there.
Right?
Okay, I'm the person they're talking about. Yes. I could be the poster child for that. Nothing's better than, biscuits and gravy and eggs with bacon and sausage. That's like my meal, my go-to meal whenever I get the option. Unfortunately, that's not the healthiest way for me to eat. Now, if I was out working in the fields 16 hours a day, I would need that food and I would work it off and I would be relatively healthy. However, sitting here in my chair doing podcasts at my computer.
The other thing is, if we look at the items that you just mentioned, right? Bacon, sausage, biscuits, and gravy. Arguably the largest problem there for you is not the bacon, and the sausage would be up there, but really it's the biscuits and the gravy that are the problem.
The milk and the bread. Yeah.
Yes. Well, and even more than that, right? What else is in gravy? Not just milk, right? But flour. Particularly, especially in our society, highly refined flour, right?
My mouth is watering right now.
As I talk about milk and flour,
I used to go to the local restaurant and they had for $2.99, you could get a cup, all the coffee you wanted, with 3 biscuits covered in gravy. $2.99. It was my go-to lunch for like 3 years. And then I decided I wanted to live past the age of 35. But I mean, are you kidding me? 3 biscuits opened up, gravy poured over all of them, and all the coffee you wanted to drink for lunch. I mean, it was amazing.
Here's what the argument boils down to, Lance. In the early 2000s, the author of this article, right, he interviewed several hundred clinicians, researchers, public health authorities for a book that he wrote. And most of them readily admitted to using the keto diet themselves. Quote, "It's a great way to lose weight," end quote. The late Stanford University Gerald Raven said to me about the diet. Quote, "That's not the issue," end quote. But these physicians, researchers wouldn't prescribe it for their patients, worrying that the risk of causing harm, particularly from the saturated fat in meat and dairy, was too great. That was the issue. They would eat the fat-rich keto diet themselves until they lost their excess pounds. Then they would stop eating keto and go back to eating, and I'm using air quotes here, folks, healthy. When they regained the weight, they would then repeat the cycle. Of course, that raises the ultimate question of, well, is eating any other way truly healthy. They don't worry about the saturated fat their patients will be eating because the clinical trials confirm that the keto way of eating is beneficial, and they can see their patients and themselves getting healthier. That's referring, by the way, to doctors today that now prescribe keto to their patients.
And can I give just a quick anecdotal piece here? People say, oh, you're eating all this, quote, unhealthy meat and things. But here's what happens when you're on it, because I have done it. Okay. You actually end up eating less meat because they tell you when you start, eat all you want, eat all the meat and cheeses you want. And you do. But then you get full really fast. And so what you end up doing is, you can't eat 6 double cheeseburgers every day because the saturated fat would end up clogging your arteries and be harmful. But what you do once you get on the diet is you're satisfied with that one piece of chicken or a hamburger or whatever, and you actually reduce. And this is my tie into what I opened this segment with. You actually reduce the amount of meat you're eating when you're on this type of diet because you don't need as much to fill you up.
The surveys don't tell us whether these health conscious people, i.e. those people that generally are accepting the notion that we've been propagating, that healthy eating is defined by eating mostly fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes. Those health conscious people are lean and healthy because that's the way they eat, or because of all the other factors that come into play, from socioeconomic privilege to lifestyle, that are associated with health consciousness. And that goes back to, Lance, what's that thing that we've said, oh my gosh, I don't know, for like a year or more, that the best predictor of your longevity is not how you eat and not how you exercise, but what?
Your zip code.
Your zip code. So maybe all of this is total waste. We don't even need to do the last segment, Lance, because at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what you eat. It just matters where you live.
No, but that's what we're doing, right? That's why we're going to have a third segment, is because we're trying to change that. That
exactly.
May be the reality today, that so many things are determined by your zip code. But we are here to not let that determine our success or our failure or our healthiness or unhealthiness, whatever it may be. We are going to change that. We have to accept that that is a reality today. We do not have to accept that that will be the reality tomorrow.
The article says this, and this is the premise of our next segment. Quote, no meaningful experimental evidence, no clinical trials exist to support the contention that we would live longer, healthier lives by eating mostly plants rather than animal-sourced foods. How do we balance that against climate change? How do we balance that against our morality? And how do we balance that against this notion that we've all been sold that plants are better for us? Well, to answer that question, we'll talk to our resident occasional vegan. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back.
We are The State of Us. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Is that our vegan who eats hot dogs? I know I'm not supposed to lead off this segment, but is that our resident vegan who eats hot dogs occasionally?
No, it's okay. You can lead off, Lance. You can lead off.
Oh,
I think this is
okay.
the perfect. I was going to quote some statistic, and I had it all planned, but I think that's But here's the point: not just to be mean to our producer, right? Because he's going to have his chance to say his piece here.
Yeah, we're going to listen to we're going to hear from the Devon creature this segment. That's why I'm excited. That's why I jumped in. Sorry about that. I know I'm ruining the scientific mood of the show here, but I just wanted everybody to know that our resident vegan here in the studio is sometimes known to stop by the local Dairy Queen and have a hot dog for lunch.
Well, that's when they're open, Lance. See, it's winter now.
Oh,
so now.
I see. So his hot dog consumption is kind of low right now.
Right. Or the veganism benefits in the winter time when well, less options available. No, but what I was going to lead off with is that 9.6 million Americans, according to a new study, are now vegan. That's a 300% increase over the last 15 years, or 3% of the United States population. Now, this, folks, does not count those that are occasional, right? Or sort of vegan.
But all the listeners on the show and all you new listeners, they all know, I hope, that the friendly redneck liberal doesn't care what anybody's religion is. So if you want to be vegan, that's fine, right? So I just want to put that in there before Devin explained to us this religious feeling of veganism.
I don't want to blow it up too much.
Or it's not religion. Is the friendly redneck liberal boomer off base here?
Well,
not quite what it is?
Just hold on, because I think this is important. It just so happened to be part of Devin and I's conversation after the show the other day, after you disconnected, where, he was talking about, well, science is what we know. And I said, well, isn't science a religion? And I said, well, here's why. Second definition of religion, Lance, right? Which is a noun. Second definition. Think about veganism as you listen to this. A pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance. Now, you could think of supreme as all powerful, right? But no, it's an important part of your existence. And I think, I'm not saying in Devin's case, but I know that for some people, right, eating healthy or thinking about what you eat, they subscribe supreme importance to it. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, they really do take it very seriously. So it is a good question, Lance. And I think, yes, we joke, but at the same time, not just veganism, but anything. People who take keto so seriously, right? Whatever it is, when you take it that seriously, at what point does it cross the line from becoming a well-rationalized, well-reasoned decision into I do it because I believe in it, right? And that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying, I think that's something to keep in mind. Anyway, let's turn it over now to Devin. You've listened to the show. You've read the articles. It sounds like, this plant business, just get rid of it and eat the animals and everything will be fine.
Well, first I want to say thank you, Lance, for just immediately throwing me under the bus. And the second thing is that also thank you for respecting my religion. I really don't consider it a religion of mine, but for a while I was vegan and vegetarian. Like, I started off vegetarian for a couple years and then I was vegan. But I wasn't really happy with that lifestyle. And
why?
Because you are so limited in the foods that you can eat, and going out to eat with anyone was a nightmare. I 0 out of 10 would recommend. I don't try to go out to eat while you're vegan because you can't get anything. But so I pretty much I'm in between, I'm kind of vegetarian, kind of not. I'll occasionally eat chicken, or a hot dog, but there's really not much else there.
But your go-to is vegetarian lasagna, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the only way I make lasagna now.
Why chicken? We'll just set aside the hot dog for a minute. Okay. Hot dogs are hot dogs, right?
That's a hard one,
right? But chicken, right? Why chicken and not pork and beef?
It's because after being vegan and vegetarian for that amount of time, it's just it's grossed me out a lot. Just the fact of even looking at it, it's hard to explain. It's just I have no desire to eat those things. It took me a long time to come around with chicken. And there's even times where I could be mid eating it and I'd be like, I can't finish this because not all I'm thinking about is this dead chicken. And I'm eating a dead carcass.
You remember, Lance, back to our, because I've been thinking about a lot recently. I'm reading this book and it's this great thing about how trees and nature stand by while we live our fast-paced lives and what they witness and what they experience, right? And that may sound silly because it's what do trees really experience, right? But set aside that for a second. It made me think back to our conversation with Andrienne, right? The world-renowned producer of Cosmos, the multiple installment science series that explores all these facets of life. And when she came on the show, she explained to us, right, Lance, the interconnected nature of how trees, plants, they have a unique and very complex system of taking care of each other that most of us set aside. Are we doing our own moral licensing and justifying that just because a cow is more relatable to us than a tree or than a head of lettuce, that we feel less guilty about eating the head of lettuce. And that may sound crazy because lettuce and a cow are not the same,
But it is when you read about it, because not only her, but in a recent, I think it's a December New York Times Sunday magazine, there is an article. The cover story is about a biologist who has spent their life. She studied that connection between plants and, with trees and plants and lichens. The different things on the floor of the forest all go together. And she's done this research of how different trees grow better with other trees around them because they send each other different nutrients that are necessary for both to grow and prosper. So is it really that far-fetched? And I know people probably are thinking, man, these two guys are off their rocker. But since we interviewed her last summer, it's amazing the material, the scientific material that is out there to prove how much nature talks to one another. And so is it, this moral licensing that, well, it's bad to do it to an animal, but it's okay to do it to a plant? Because are they closer? Are they really the same thing as far as communicating with one another and how they grow and develop and take care of everything on this planet, which in turn helps take care of us?
I guess the point there is because then some people are going to ask, so what, Justin Lance? I mean, are you saying basically we just have to stop eating and die? Because no.
Well, what I'm saying is don't put down those of us who like to eat meat because you like to eat plants. We both have to cross some of those thresholds in order to survive. And so I'm no worse than you are because I eat meat and you eat vegetables or hot dogs from Dairy Queen. So I'm just loving the Devin creature being on the show today. I love him to death. I mean, he sits here and takes it, but folks, he is so bright and intelligent and has some really good things to say when we're not on air, but he just has trouble putting it together on air. But you need to listen. We need to get him on more often because he says some really good things that makes us all stop and think here on the show.
One of the substantive differences, right, Lance, between why we can make people feel bad about eating animals and why we don't make them feel bad about eating plants is because we can easily comprehend the pain and suffering that animals and I just want to be clear here, people, get this right, that are being treated completely wrong, okay? I am not suggesting that it's okay for animals to be abused in the name of food production. And where do we draw the line on abuse? Well, that's a different show. But point is, no, I don't think that animals should be tortured in order to provide us food. Okay. I think there's a lot of people out there, me being one of them, that is capable of finding the appropriate balance of giving an animal a truly quality life prior to it arriving at a place where we consume it. We are not able to perceive if plants, experience pain, and if they do, what that looks like. So on the one hand, we can show you a video and say, look, this is the worst of the worst. This is what we do to animals, right? Isn't that terrible? And then we can get people to be disgusted and revolted by the thought of it, which is understandable because what you're seeing in those circumstances is revolting and it is disgusting and it shouldn't happen, right? At the same time, we can't really do that with plants because we don't yet have a good way of understanding that component. But I think it's a good point, Lance, and it's one that's worth thinking about for people to consider. I'm not sure that the moral high ground is actually there. At the moment, we think that it is, but I'm sure as we learn more about plants, we may not feel that way anymore. Although in the long term, and the article points this out, it's that question of, and this is what it comes down to that I think is honestly, it's very tough, right, Lance? It's that final question that they leave us with. And that question is, quote, but no one can tell us whether we should subordinate our own health and well-being, and perhaps that of our children too, to that of the planet. In other words, and this is, you highlighted this at the beginning of the show, Lance, the ultimate question that we all have to deal with is if we can definitively say that, eating something like a keto diet is good for you, or even having a balanced, whatever that means anymore, balanced diet, right? That you're eating plants, you're eating animals, you're eating some combination of these things. That even if you're doing that, right? If the health benefits are here in the short term, in your lifespan, can you still justify that if in the long term it means the death of the planet? I don't know. That's a terribly difficult question, right? And it's probably a personal thing for everybody. If what is best for me, and I'm not saying it is, if what's best for me or Lance is to eat meat mostly, and eat very little of other stuff, but that's not what's best for the planet. And I'm not going to be around to see what happens, or really feel the full consequences. It's a difficult question then, isn't it?
It is. And then, I'm just going to end with this. And that is that when the sun blows up, the planet's going to die anyway. So does it all really matter? And go back and look up the episodes that we did this summer. So, based on the book Cosmos. So it's kind of an interesting thought. But yeah, you're right. And I think we all we all do the best we can, right? I mean, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. I think we all do the best we can in the moment that we're living. And the important thing is that here at True Chat, we have a mission statement, and it's to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And I think we've done that. We've had a great conversation today, and we've asked a lot of questions, and we'd like for you, the audience, to make sure that you chime in at podcast@thestateofus.org and let us know how you feel, and tell your friends and family about this show. And if they want to find out how they can listen to it, they can find us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere podcasts are found. And the word LICHEN is lichen, a fungus-like thing growing on the floor of a forest. Okay.
So if you want to read the articles that we referenced today, they're both pretty good. There's a lot in them. They are linked at thestateofus.org. That's our website, thestateofus.org. We'd like to hear from you. You email us, podcast@thestateofus.org, podcast@thestateofus.org. And I think it's important to note, this is not the first episode Lance and I have done on farming, on plant-based alternatives, on veganism, right? There's other stuff out there. And sometimes we're taking the other side and sharing with you the other perspective. One of the reasons we brought this up is because, look, we did an episode about a year ago, right? On the new Impossible. It was new at that point, not so new anymore. The Impossible Whopper coming to Burger King, right? And what that meant and what would it mean for the future. And so go back and look at that stuff, because I think there's a lot of interesting things there. And if you've followed and been with us through this process, hopefully you'll appreciate what we came up with today. And if you don't, you should let us know. You should tell us. The podcast is released Tuesdays and Thursdays by 4 a.m. Eastern time. The syndicated radio program is heard on the weekends across the United States. So check your local talk market, see if they carry us. If they don't, call them up and tell them they should. For the State of Us on True Chat in the farm town of Urbana, Ohio, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to our recording producer, Devin McCain, editing producer, Bradley Butch, and thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.